and a very warm welcome to another edition of World Panorama. Like always, get ready to catch up on the biggest international news of the week. I am Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Massacre of innocents in Syria, 1,300 dead in an alleged nerve gas attack. UN Security Council meets after opposition blames the army. We take a closer look. Gas attack claims draw calls for action. Obama terms attack of grave concern. France calls for use of force while Russia urges Syria to cooperate with the weapons inquiry. US Army Private Bradley Manning, sentenced to 35 years for leaking classified documents, now claims he is a woman named Chelsea. And in sports, world number 3 tennis sensation Maria Sharapova pulls out of the US Open due to a shoulder injury. Our top story this week. Syria's opposition accused President Bashar al-Assad's forces of gassing many hundreds of people. Between 800 and 1,700 people have died on Wednesday after a rocket attack on the Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta in what would, if confirmed, be the world's worst chemical weapons attack in decades. Despite seemingly overwhelming evidence, the Syrian government continues to deny that it used chemical weapons. 36 countries, including the US, have now called for a UN investigation. While Russia, Assad's key international ally in more than 2 years of civil war, has urged the Syrian government to allow a UN experts mission to investigate these allegations. The situation in Syria is very grim. Remember, we are talking about a possible crime against humanity. Reports have emerged before as well. Nerve gases are the most potent and deadly of the known chemical agents. The death toll is mounting. More clashes have erupted across Syria. This is something that needs understanding. And to help us with that, I welcome on the show Mr. Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, former ambassador on the show. Welcome, sir. But before that, here's a look at this detailed report.
عضمت الساعة 21/8/2013 في نفس هذا اليوم الذي تم فيه مجزرة معظمية الشام من عام 2012 تقوم اليوم قوات العصابة الأسدية بقصف المدينة بشتى أنواع الصواريخ ومنها الغازات السامة.
In Syria, over 1,300 people are dead in what could be the world's most lethal chemical weapons attack since 1980s.
Basically, the regime overnight started bombarding the western part of Ghouta, which is near Damascus, is in the countryside of Damascus, with missiles, chemical missiles. We have hundreds of people who've been killed overnight. As of now, as we speak now, we have 1,188 people killed. Of those, there's over 100 little children due to the use of chemical weapons. The regime at the same time is starting to push its ground forces to enter into these areas. The situation is extremely dire.
Shocking images emerged from the perpetrated attack showing pale, lifeless bodies of children lined up on floors of makeshift hospitals. An attack that's being denied by the Syrian military and the government.
هذا الكلام الذي يعني قيل هو كلام سخيف وساذج وغير علمي وغير منطقي وغير موضوعي، ونحن نعني ما نقول. ليس هناك استخدام إطلاقا لمثل ذلك. على الأقل أنا بحكي على القوات المسلحة السورية والدولة السورية.
The deadly attack prompted an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council in New York.
As you have seen from the statement of the Secretary General earlier today, he was deeply disturbed, in fact shocked, by these allegations, and of course we see the need to investigate this as soon as possible.
Both the rebels and the government forces have accused each other of using chemical weapons throughout the 28-month conflict. In July 2012, the Syrian government implicitly admitted what had long been suspected, that Syria had stocks of chemical weapons. The 2-year Syrian conflict has resulted in over 1 lakh deaths and 1.5 million refugees.
All right, Ambassador Mukherjee, let me come straight up to you. The Syrian crisis, do you believe, has entered a new phase which is far more complicated than what we've seen in the past?
Yes, I think not just because of the use of chemical weapons. One must remember that accusations of the use of chemical weapons are not new in the
Right.
Syrian conflict. They've been made before. This incident is the worst of its kind, and naturally, therefore, it's getting international attention at a much higher level and a much more intense level. But, and also in the history of the Middle East, nerve gas, chemical weapons have been used.
Yes.
Saddam Hussein used it against the Kurds. Bashar al-Assad's father has been accused of using chemical weapons against his opponents in Hama. Before, in 1980, almost plastering the city into rubble when anywhere between 10,000 and 40,000 people died.
Right.
So, yes, I would say this is a defining moment in the crisis, but it's a mess anyway. It's just getting worse day by day.
And do you believe that the army has a role to play in this alleged gas attack?
Now, here I have a few problems. The problem is that, you know, having witnessed and studied conflict situations as part of our jobs, I mean, you have a situation where chemical weapons are actually banned.
Yeah.
It is one of those conventions which India has joined with full support. In fact, India was one of the first countries to destroy its own chemical weapon stockpiles, and even chemicals that can be used in weapon stockpiles. We have expressed our grave concern if these allegations are true. Now, naturally, there will be denials on both sides. In fact, the figures that were mentioned about the number of people dead are also in dispute, which is very predictable in a conflict situation. Now, the critics of those, the supporters of the regime, will question the timing of the demands for UN inspection. The UN team is already there, and suddenly you have a situation where the rebels say there's been this massive chemical weapons attack. We have taken samples of skin and flesh and hair and sent it to the UN inspectors. Why only now? Why not before? So, and the Syrian government, predictably, I can tell you, will reply that this was carried out by some enemies of the regime to buttress their opposition of the regime.
Absolutely. They're already calling it the claims illogical and fabricated. So the blame game is what's going on.
Absolutely.
Right now.
And there's no hard evidence. And don't forget, the UN's job, even if it is allowed by the Syrian regime, which it has not allowed so far, but even if it is allowed by the Syrian regime to conduct its inspection of the latest horrific incidents, its job is not to find out who did it. Its job is to find out if chemical weapons have been used.
Right.
After that, the blame game continues.
In fact, I was going to just ask you that. Now, there have been calls from various countries for a thorough probe, but Syria, as you pointed out, has not allowed the inspection team to visit the site and find out, what it set out to do, investigate these claims. In such a scenario, what happens? How does, the UN team get inside Syria and start conducting a fair and free investigation?
Well, what happens, instead of my, responding to that theoretically, let me give you an example. What happened with the so-called weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Even the US Secretary of State much later admitted that he was lied to. Or obviously, I mean, one knows that there was a predetermined decision to attack Iraq, and it was carried through regardless of whether there was evidence or not.
Right.
So this is not going to really affect the permutations and combinations among the policies of those who really matter in this conflict, internal as well as external.
All right, Ambassador Mukherjee, hold on to that thought. Let's also play out some of the reactions that I have for our viewers from various leaders across the world.
The United States will be consulting with our allies and our partners on the United Nations Security Council about this. Because this is and should be a top priority of the United Nations.
qu'il y a des possibilités de répliquer si
Militaires,
les Américains, les Britanniques, les Français, pourquoi pas les Russes aussi, parce que les Russes avaient eux aussi condamné l'utilisation d'armes chimiques, vous le rappelez. En principe, les Russes ont signé aussi le traité qui interdit l'utilisation d'armes chimiques.
Bütün kırmızı çizgiler aşıldı ama hala Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nde bir karar almak bile mümkün olmadı. Hala bu konuda kırmızı çizgiler ortaya koyan taraflar ve hepimiz için bir sorumluluktur bu.
Поток иностранных наемников в Сирийскую Арабскую Республику сопоставим с пиковыми показателями конфликта в Ираке в 2005-2007 годах. Несмотря на предпринимаемые усилия и поддержку извне, незаконные вооруженные формирования пока им не удается переломить ситуацию в свою пользу.
When weapons of mass destruction, including chemical weapons, are used against civilian targets, it is repugnant beyond description.
All right, we heard what various countries are saying, and more reactions have been pouring in as we speak. But Ambassador Mukherjee, do you think this attack now will trigger any sort of foreign intervention?
I frankly doubt it in terms of, let us say, comparing it with what the foreign intervention was in the case of Libya, where a case was made out for intervention under a UN umbrella for a no-fly zone, and that was used as an excuse for a full-scale intervention, military intervention in that country. I doubt that because the face-off here is between China and Russia on the one side and the US on the other. This talk of the UN being concerned and the Secretary General being concerned, let me be very blunt, means nothing. The shots are called by the Security Council's P5 and the great powers of the world externally. And internally, it is the internal dynamics of Syria which will determine the outcomes. So there is already foreign intervention. The rebels are being armed by outside.
Right.
All their arms are coming in from outside. All the Syrian arms are coming in from Russia, who claim that they are not breaking sanctions because they are following contracts that had already been signed earlier. So in that sense, covert external intervention is already there. I doubt if there will be overt military intervention beyond a continuation, perhaps in a much more amplified form, a much greater degree of the kind of intervention that is already going on, not just by the US, Russia, but by other Arab states such as Qatar and Saudi Arabia.
Right. Now you said in a very stern manner that these statements coming in from all these people that we actually believe could do something, real power is not in their hands at this point, and they're just statements coming out. What about India? India has said nothing as far as this attack is concerned.
You know, sometimes saying nothing is a very wise and a very good thing to do. What is India's interest in the Middle East? There are many, many interests in the Middle East, as everybody knows. But the two central concerns that India has is the millions of Indians who live and work in the Middle East, who are crucial to not just our economy, but as Indians, our fundamental duties as a country is for their protection.
Absolutely.
Which happened in Libya and in other places, in Iraq, which led to the greatest airlift in history, bigger than the Berlin airlift.
Right.
And our energy security. So peace and stability in the Middle East are of the greatest concern for India, which is why I'm one of those who feel that the statement made by our spokesman, where he said a couple of things. One is that using chemical weapons is of the gravest concern, which is quite correct. And the rest of the statement, which will be criticized by people for saying it was an anodyne bromide, was about abjuring violence and getting together to solve the problems through dialogue and so on. But that is precisely what should happen. Because if you notice, in all these statements, some of which were played out on your screen just now, not one has spoken about measures to stop the fighting.
Right. Because perhaps...
To put pressure to stop the fighting, not to fuel it.
Because because it lies not in the hands of just one country or, no one solution to that. But the fact remains that there is a sense of urgency and responsibility as far as Syria is concerned. How many lives have been lost?
Yes.
For how much longer will Syria have to suffer this fate remains to be seen. Ambassador Mukherjee, it was a pleasure having you on the show and sharing all those important thoughts on the show this week. All right, we'll take a very quick break. I'll be back with more world news. Also a look at Bradley Manning verdict. Stay tuned. You're watching World Panorama. US soldier Bradley Manning was sentenced on Wednesday to 35 years in a military prison for turning over more than 700,000 classified files to WikiLeaks in the biggest breach of secret data in the nation's history. So ended a high-profile case that sparked a heated debate about whether the Obama administration is prosecuting whistleblowers rather than protecting them. Dozens of Bradley Manning supporters gathered outside the White House to protest his sentencing and called on President Barack Obama to pardon him.
I was not surprised, but I was horrified, heartbroken, disappointed. It was horrible to hear that sentence.
Amnesty International is currently calling on the president to commute his sentence to time served because of all these extenuating circumstances of his case, but also to protect whistleblowers in the future, future leakers, individuals who expose human rights violations, and to actually go after individuals who commit human rights violations rather than the individuals who are actually exposing what the government's doing.
The US soldier was sentenced on Wednesday to 35 years in a military prison for turning over more than 700,000 classified files to WikiLeaks in the biggest breach of secret data in the nation's history.
Make no mistake about it, the cancer of overclassification is threatening the very fabric of our free society. Overclassification hinders debate, it hinders what we know about our government, it hinders finding solutions to common problems, and that is, how do we keep our way of life in a post-9/11 world?
In his crisp army dress uniform and wire-rimmed glasses, Manning stood rigidly at attention and showed no emotion as the judge read the sentence in a brief hearing. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange called it a tactical victory for the defense. In 2010, Manning turned over more than 700,000 classified files, battlefield videos and diplomatic cables to WikiLeaks, the pro-transparency website, in a case that has commanded international attention. Manning will be dishonorably discharged from the US military and his rank will be reduced to private from private first class. A Pakistani court indicted Pervez Musharraf in the 2007 assassination of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, escalating legal challenges to the ex-military dictator since he ended his self-imposed exile in March. This is the first time a current or former army chief has been charged with a crime in Pakistan. Musharraf says the charges are politically motivated.
In a move unprecedented in Pakistan, a country that has been ruled for more than half of its life by the military and where the army still calls the shots, former army chief Pervez Musharraf has been charged. General Pervez Musharraf has been indicted on 3 charges in connection with the murder of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto in 2007. Musharraf, who has been under house arrest on the edge of the capital Islamabad since April 19, denied all charges.
Next date है 27 for evidence. इनकार किया, प्रेसिडेंट तो कहीं भी सिरे से इन्वॉल्व ही नहीं है, टोटली। बल्कि मैं ये समझती हूँ कि जितने भी ऑफेंसेस लगे हुए हैं केस में, उनमें एक सिंगल केस जो है वो प्रेसिडेंट पे अट्रैक्ट ही नहीं करता. आई डोंट नो कि उनके अगेंस्ट ये प्रोसीडिंग्स किस तरह चलाई जा रही हैं.
The former president is also facing charges in other cases, including the killing of Baloch leader Akbar Bugti in a military operation in 2006 and for taking unconstitutional steps by imposing emergency and removing judges in 2007.
And much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of other global news of the week. Israel responded overnight to a rocket attack on Thursday from southern Lebanon, bombing what military officials described as a terrorist site between Beirut and Sidon. It was Israel's first airstrike inside Lebanon since 2006 war with the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. The target was a base belonging to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command, located near the town of Nameh, 10 miles south of Beirut. Japan's nuclear regulator said that the operator of the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant failed to properly monitor storage tanks holding dangerously contaminated water that have sprung leaks and are a source of international concern. Japan's nuclear agency has upgraded the severity level of a radioactive water leak at the plant from 1 to 3 on an international scale. A photojournalist in her early 20s was gang raped in the Indian city of Mumbai. The attack on Thursday evening caused an outcry on social media, with many users shocked that it took place in Mumbai, widely considered to be India's safest city for women. The woman was admitted to a hospital in South Mumbai. A medical helicopter believed to be carrying former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak was seen departing from Tora prison on the southern outskirts of Cairo on Thursday. The Prime Minister's office said Mubarak will be placed under house arrest. Meanwhile, a group of activists opposed to the release of Mubarak held a theatrical protest symbolizing their rejection of the judicial decision. Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, Africa's oldest leader at 89, was sworn in on Thursday for a new 5-year term in the face of criticism from opponents and the West that his re-election in a July vote was not credible. He took his new oath of office at a ceremony held in a 60,000-seat football stadium in Harare, witnessed by thousands of cheering supporters, diplomats and delegations from the region. Russia's Far East had been hit by the region's biggest floods in 120 years, with about 50,000 people affected and authorities predicting more damage in the coming weeks. Areas around the Russian major Far Eastern city of Khabarovsk have been flooded after heavy rains led to a rise of water in Amur River. Over 1,000 rescue workers from all over Russia arrived to the region to fight the floods. Shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week. Here's all the sports action.
Maria Sharapova withdrew from the US Open due to a shoulder injury. The second major player to withdraw hurt after Frenchman Jo-Wilfried Tsonga. After missing several weeks with a hip problem, she then returned at Cincinnati last week but went out in her first match. She also parted ways with coach Jimmy Connors after less than a month. The 26-year-old has been troubled in the past by a shoulder problem, with extensive rehabilitation and time away from tennis. El Salvador has provisionally suspended 22 footballers for 30 days in connection with possible match fixing. The players suspended include 6 with more than 50 caps each: Ramon Sanchez, Ozel Romero, Eliseo Quintanilla, Denis Elas, Alfredo Pacheco and Marvin Gonzalez. New Zealand batsman Jesse Ryder has been suspended for 6 months for failing a doping test. New Zealand media reports said the 29-year-old had tested positive to banned substances after playing a match with provincial side Wellington Firebirds earlier this year. World Cup tickets for Brazil 2014 officially went on sale on August 20th, even if the Sao Paulo Stadium scheduled to host the opening game next June is not yet complete. Tickets for the 2014 World Cup will cost some 10% more than in South Africa in 2010. More than 1 million tickets for the first phase of the tournament went on sale on 20th August.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap. Norwegian director Harald Zwart's new film City of Bones, the screen adaptation of the first book from the best-selling series The Mortal Instruments by author Cassandra Clare, made its European debut on 20th August in Berlin.
Und der Schlüssel zu unserem Überleben musst du deine Vergangenheit entschlüsseln.
Zwart was accompanied on the red carpet by leading actors Lily Collins and Jamie Campbell-Bower, who played two friends in the action-filled fantasy movie, and actors Robert Michael Sheehan and Kevin Zegers. City of Bones is due to release on 29th August. London's Leicester Square was filled with screams of young fans as global boy band sensation One Direction launched their debut movie One Direction This Is Us. Band members whipped the crowd into a frenzy when they arrived dressed in black to the world premiere. One Direction This Is Us goes on release in the UK on August 29th. Prince William and his wife Kate released two informal family snapshots as their first official photos of their son Prince George. Instead of a traditional formal photograph for George's first official shoot, the couple released two shots taken by the Duchess's father, Michael Middleton. Veteran actor Dick Van Dyke, best known for his self-titled hit 1960s television comedy, survived a car fire apparently unscathed on a Los Angeles area freeway. A spokesman for the California Highway Patrol confirmed it was the 87-year-old performer whose car was reported on fire on the shoulder of the Ventura Freeway, with the driver seen slumped over the steering wheel. That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. See you next week, same time, with more international news. Till then, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This week, I closed the show with visuals sure to bring a smile to your faces, and they did to these young Afghan children. A Danish man tries to bring some relief to kids in conflict-ridden Afghanistan through a traveling circus. Enjoy, and thanks for tuning in.